In the studio today, professional runner Drew Hunter. He's been in Boulder, Colorado for about 10 years, and he's a professional runner for Adidas. I really enjoyed my conversation with Drew today. We talked about a lot of different things. I dove into how he got into running, his journey through breaking 4 minutes in the mile multiple times as a high schooler, declining to go to some of the best colleges in the country to run for them, and instead signing a 10-year contract with Adidas. He's 27 now, so he's been a pro for about 8 years, so he's had a lot of experience and arguably one of the best runners in America. And so I super enjoyed this conversation with Drew. I'm very passionate about triathlon. As you guys know, I'm passionate about endurance sports and cycling, but oftentimes I'll find myself checking in on the Diamond League more than the triathlon on the weekend because I'm just really a fan of the 1500, the 5K, and the 10K, and all the other events that go on for professional track and field running. So I love this conversation with Drew, and I'm sure you guys will too. Enjoy this episode with Drew Hunter. All right, welcome to another episode of the Endurance Matters podcast. I'm your host, Justin Metzler, and today in studio, I have Drew Hunter, professional runner for Adidas. And really looking forward to this conversation with Drew. I'm a huge fan of triathlon and multisport, obviously, but I'm really into running. So I'm stoked you're in the studio today, Drew. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat about running.
Awesome, man. Yeah, running and all things endurance sports. I always start the podcast off with a hard-hitting icebreaker question to start. So here it is. Would you rather sell your car and have to elliptigo everywhere, or sell your elliptigo? You can keep your car, but you have to aqua jog for all your cross training.
Ooh, that's a good question. It's actually funny you bring that up. I've been elliptigoing a lot. I'm getting back into running, and I really like the elliptigo. I'm one of those guys that chooses that over a bike for cross training. But I have a kid now, so I need the car. I'm sorry. I guess I'm aqua jogging for all my cross training.
You could chuck the kid in a backpack or something and pop on the elliptigo, you know?
That's fair. That's a long fall, though, if I go down.
Oh, yeah.
Even farther for the kid.
100%. I've never tried the elliptigo. I feel like, I don't know, I follow you on Strava, so I noticed the elliptigoing, and I was like, oh, man, maybe I got to get into this, you know?
Yeah, it's a good workout. I don't know. I enjoy it. Like, as I'm sure you know, like, for me as a full-time runner, biking, like, I just don't want to, like, tighten up my hips any more than they need to be. Like I need like, a full stride, and I need to be able to, be coordinated around the track. And so I was like, elliptigo seems like a good sort of hybrid cross training, and it's fun. I love it. It's fun.
Yeah, for sure. Well, for those that don't know Drew, or maybe coming to this episode from triathlon, Drew's arguably one of the best professional runners in America. He was an incredibly fast high school runner, breaking 4 minutes in the mile multiple times, and comes from a long line of runners in his family. So I want to hear more first. I have a lot of like very detailed, deep questions, but we need to get a little background going here. So how did you get into running in the first place?
Yeah, both my parents were runners. My dad he ran post collegiately for Athletics West, which was, sort of like pro groups before they were pro groups, because no one got paid back then. And my mom was a Division I runner. She was more middle distance. My dad was longer distance. And yeah, my parents never forced me into running, but running was sort of always like adjacent in my life. My parents coached a youth team. They, track was on TV. The Olympics were a big deal, a lot of sort of those things. And I always kind of, knew that I probably had the genetics to be decent at running, but my parents were great about not forcing me into it. They were sort of hands off with, that approach. And they sort of thought maybe if he, just tries it out and is good at it, then he'll be excited. And that's exactly what happened. I went out for the cross country team my freshman year, and I caught the running bug, as I tell everyone. I fell in love with being good at something, and I fell in love with, the process of training really hard, working at something you care about, being passionate about it. And the results just, kept getting better and better.
Was there a moment when you realized you were very good at it, or was it kind of a slow progression where the results started kind of trickling in and it was just kind of like a slow burn?
I think, originally, I won a middle school mile when I was in 8th grade, and I was like, okay, I'm the best kid in my middle school at the mile. That was sort of like a light bulb moment, but running's really interesting because no matter how good you get, most of the time there's people faster than you, and there's always new goals and new things that excite you with it. So the process for me was always just, there's so many things that excited me. It was, in high school, I, wanted to first make top 7 for the varsity team in cross country. And then after I accomplished that, I wanted to make the state meet. And then I wanted to break 4:20 in the mile. And the goals sort of just kept growing. And I'm still, I've been doing this for over a decade now, and I still have big goals that have just kind of, the goalpost has just moved a little bit. And so it's sort of always been that slow burn of just like, I want more.
Yep. So you mentioned 420 in breaking that in high school. I mentioned it before. You already you ended up breaking 4 minutes in the mile in high school. So how do you go from 420 being the goal to breaking 4 minutes being the goal in a very short amount of time?
Yeah, I stayed healthy all throughout high school, and I just got better every single year. My parents did an excellent job, sort of managing expectations, but also realizing like I was talented and we don't need to, have all of this talent be used up in my high school years. They wanted me to have a long, fruitful running career, college, and hopefully even beyond college. So for me, I just sort of, I fell in love with running. I fell in love with the process, and all my race results took care of themselves. Like, I don't even think I remember writing down I need to break 4 minutes. I just started to believe that I could do it, and I started to train accordingly, and, the results followed.
Yeah. How in high school, and I guess during that time, how obsessed with running were you? Because I know from my perspective, I got into triathlon in middle school, kind of similar situation, and I was just obsessed with training, and school was sort of like, all right, I'm going to do what I got to do to get by. And I was just like very singularly focused on triathlon. Was it similar for you with running?
Yeah, I was such a running nerd. Once I caught the running bug, which I'd say was my freshman year, like I was always on the internet looking up my competitors' times. I was obsessed with training. I consumed every single piece of content out there about people that were better than me, what workouts they were doing, what they were eating, how, their sleep habits. I was obsessed with all that stuff. I actually think I'm a way better now. Like I'm pretty hands off. Like I have a lot more balance now, but I think early on I found my purpose and I found my thing, and I sort of just ran with it. No pun intended.
Yeah, 100%. No, I can relate to that completely. What was your parents' role at that time? Were they hands-on with the coaching side or the running side? Like what did that whole situation look like? Because obviously you had very elite training during that period.
Yeah, my parents were great that, they were the high school coaches of the team, and our team was very bad at the beginning. When I first, stepped on foot to the cross country team, we were not very good. And my parents had a really big sort of task of turning the team around, and they did a great job balancing an elite athlete like me who was, winning state meets, traveling to races outside of the state, finding bigger competitions, but also developing all the rest of the team. And so my parents, they did a great job. They would coach me. They would give me workouts that I could be integrated with the team as much as possible, so that I sort of had that experience of being a part of a team, which is really important and special. But also they didn't neglect athletes who were, 25-minute 5K athletes. Those athletes had just as much time and attention as I did. And so they really sort of, balanced that perfectly. And, a few years after I left high school, my high school team ended up being national cross country champions without me on the team. And so they, sort of perfected that craft of developing, a really good high school team.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think you look back at some of the, the articles written about you, and there's definitely like this high school prodigy thing, and you've done so much as a pro that I do want to get into. One thing I was really interested in was the transition from elite high school runner to becoming a college athlete, or in your case, declining to become a college athlete. Walk me through a little bit about that time. Like, how did that all sort of play out? Because if I'm correct, you declined to go to college and you signed a professional running contract with Adidas right out of high school. Walk me through that time in your life and sort of those decisions.
Yeah, it was crazy. I had a really good senior cross country season, and I won Foot Locker National Championships, which, at the time was sort of the biggest cross country meet of the year. It's the 40 best men and women in the United States for cross country. And I came off that, and, sort of like the elephant in the room was, can Drew Hunter break 4 minutes in the mile? Can I set a 3K record? And so we set up some races, and some pro races, actually. I was a high school athlete still, but we set up some pro races to go after some of the high school records. And I ended up breaking the 3K high school record. And then a week later, I broke 4 minutes for the first time at the Armory in a pro race. And there was a lot of hype around it. There was sort of a lot of media attention. And I was approached, or my parents were approached by an agent, and the agent said, Drew is running times that pro athletes are running, and have you ever considered going pro? And we sort of went down that rabbit hole and explored what that was going to look like. And I ultimately decided that was something that was intriguing to me and sounded like a really cool opportunity. And so I took it. And, there was a lot of risk with it. Professional running's interesting because it's, you're a professional athlete, but you have a lot of autonomy. Not a lot of people are given a group to train with or a strength coach or anything like that. You sort of have to choose your own path and figure out where you want to live and, who you want to train with and sort of surround your own, set up your own situation and your own environment. And so for me, that was exciting. I know for some people, they want to go to college where you have a coach, hold your hand onto the airplane for your meets and, literally tell you exactly where you need to be. You have a class schedule. You have, all these things that keep you in a very regimented schedule and keep you on track. And that's great for a lot of people. And some people need that. But I really sort of liked the freedom that being a professional runner gave me. And it allowed me to choose what races I wanted to do and sort of how I wanted to train and who I wanted to train with. And that was exciting. And, yeah, it was a hard first year as a pro. I mean, as my mom always tells people, like I skipped 4 grades basically and was racing guys who did 4 years of college. I missed out on the opportunity to run tactical races. Like I didn't really know how to navigate, the pressure of being a pro. And no one cares about your age once you're on the starting line with pros. It's just like, oh, you have an Adidas kit on, you're getting paid to do this. Like, all right, you need to go out and beat people. And so for me, the expectations definitely weighed on me. And I sort of needed to reframe things and figure out, what was a win for me in my first year. And it wasn't necessarily, winning races anymore. It was still figuring out like how I could navigate the difficulty of not being the best.
Yeah. Was the expectation more self-imposed or was there actually somebody from Adidas saying, hey, we've got this expectation that Drew is running 356 in the mile now, or, he's getting into professional races and winning them straight away? Or was it more kind of like a personal thing?
Yeah. Great question. There was never any pressure from my sponsors. They wanted to think long-term with me. That's why they signed me to a long-term contract. But it was, like you said, like I loved running and you never want to have setbacks. You never want to have injuries. You always think it's going to be this perfect linear progression and it's just not how it works. Yeah, and so for me, like I had a good first year as a pro. Like my whole goal the first year was to make a USA final. I thought that would be a great sort of, I didn't think I'd make a team. I didn't, I was very realistic with my goals and I did make the US final and I set a personal best in the 1500 and at the time, I think it was like I was still under 20. It was the 3rd fastest time ever by someone under 20 in the U.S. And the guys on the list were like Matt Centrowitz and Jim Ryan. Pretty good company to be in. Someone might have to fact check me on that.
Legends.
But, I think it was really more just like myself. Like I just felt pressure all of a sudden. When you're in high school, it's just you're just running because you love it and you're around your teammates and it's fun. And I was winning all those races. Like I was beating people by a lot, and it wasn't really. It was like, even if I didn't run a time I wanted, I beat people by 20 seconds. And so no one really cared. So
yeah, for sure. And there's a different experience when you're just winning races. I think that is just a different feeling than progressing into the pro ranks and everyone's a lot more even, and maybe you're just not winning races anymore. And even though you're performing and getting personal best, it's just not the same feedback personally as winning is. I'm curious to hear more about the actual contract itself, because from what the internet says, that was a 10-year contract. Is that correct?
I think it was 9 years.
Okay.
It's so funny that we're actually having this podcast. I'm in, my contract's up. And I'm in negotiations now with my agent and with my sponsor to figure out another contract. So it's actually really funny that we are talking about this.
Yeah, because I'm really interested in the business side of the sport. Like in triathlon, the sponsorship's kind of a big deal of what we do, and it's maybe a little bit different because it's a bit more piecemeal. You've got a lot of different sports going on, and I think the contracts are less significant. I feel like, from what I understand, with big professional running contracts, it's kind of like enough to sustain you maybe for your life, whereas in triathlon those are maybe a little bit more difficult to come across. You kind of have to piece together maybe 5 or 10 smaller sponsors to make it sort of the equivalent of one Nike sponsorship or Adidas sponsorship. But at the time when you sign a 9-year contract, is that something that's going around, or is that unusual?
Yeah, very unusual. Most contracts are 2 to 4 years for runners, the Olympic cycle.
Yeah, for sure.
That's sort of how, if you're coming out of college and you've run pretty well, you're an All-American, and the Olympics are in 2 years, a company's probably going to sign you to a 2-year deal. Or if, say, the Olympics just happened and you're a top athlete and you're a stud, you'll probably get a 4-year deal with a company through the Olympics, because a lot of the bonuses, a lot of sort of the financial incentives are around the Olympics because it's such a big deal for our sport, and, world championships and, sort of those are the high level races. But yeah, so that's how it works. My contract was rare because I was one of the first people ever that signed a pro high school deal. There was a few sprinters and there was a few female athletes that have done it, but even Alan Webb, who's sort of like, the legend of had all the high school records, he went to Michigan for a year, didn't work out, and then signed a pro contract with Nike. So sort of the route I took was a little different, and we've since then seen a few other people do it. Hobbs Kessler, who was 5th in the Olympics in the 1500, went pro.
Totally.
Josh Hoey, who just ran 143 in the 800, went pro out of high school. Ironically, all Adidas athletes, which is cool. That's a really long running contract. Running's weird because a lot of careers, the longer you stay in the career, the more money you make because, you're working up and you're taking on more responsibility. Running sort of the opposite. People get really excited about you when you're young, and then the older you get, you're kind of kicked to the curb, and you're old news. And so obviously running's gotten a little bit better with, the financial situation. And I feel like companies are really actually supporting people and allowing them to, be professionals. And we can't be professionals if we're not getting paid livable wages, obviously.
Totally. Yeah. So nowadays it's completely different than the landscape was 10 years ago. You've got the introduction of the NIL money coming in. How much of your experience was dictated purely by the dollars and cents that someone like Adidas is coming and offering versus just the opportunity to race professionally? Because nowadays you have the NIL situation where a company like On, Adidas, or Nike can come in, sponsor a collegiate athlete for probably similar value to whatever you were getting paid as a high schooler, and they can still have that college experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think that something that, I love sort of the quote, there are no solutions, there's only trade-offs. And I completely feel this way about sort of, the whole landscape of NIL deals and running. When you're a college kid, you have the best setup you're probably ever going to get. Even the top dogs have to figure out their physios, have to figure out their strength coaches. Everything in college is given to you. You're told when to get on your flights. Your flights are paid for. So if you're a college kid, sign an NIL deal, get a degree, have teammates, have a coach, have a strength coach, have all the facilities you need, have all your travel paid for, and, save or invest that money that you're getting, and you'll come out of college in a really good spot. That wasn't the case when I was, and that's probably what I would have explored if I was, looking back on things. But I also just think college kids are super valuable. I mean, NCAA sports people love them. So I think, like I was saying earlier, a lot of your value is tied to your age in our sport. And so like the younger you are, and if you're, really killing it out on the cross country course or on the track, like that's when you have to capitalize and have to make the most of, your financial situation. Yeah,
it's super positive for running as a whole. I mean, you look at like Parker Valby or Nico Young, like these athletes are offering so much value, and I think, they're getting paid correlate to what their value is, to what they're bringing to the sport. So that's really cool. Sponsor of today's episode is Precision Fuel and Hydration. These guys have been an awesome partner of mine for many years, and I really love the entire product line. They helped me tremendously when it came down to getting my fluid needs sorted out, getting my electrolyte needs organized, and also just figuring out how many carbs per hour I needed. And they have an entire product line that has a lot of variety and different options for you. So my favorite option from them is the PF30 Chew. I sort of take them out of their wrapper and load them into my top tube storage compartment on my bike and just munch on those every 20 or 30 minutes when I'm out doing a hard training session or doing a race. They also have a bunch of sweat experts over there who can help you figure out exactly what your fluid, carbohydrate, and electrolyte needs are. So head on over to pfandh.com. Redeem code BigMetz15. Once again, that's BigMetz15 via the link provided. When you transition to turning pro, you have to kind of, like you alluded to, you have to create your own environment. How did you end up here in Boulder, and what was that decision-making process like?
Yeah, so I stayed, my first year as a pro, I stayed living with my parents because I just didn't know where I wanted to be. And that was sort of like, my trial and error year. I was going to travel to some places. I was going to try out, sort of the typical running spots. I visited Flagstaff. I visited Boulder. I did training stints in both. And ultimately, I I just got a good feeling about Boulder. I love the running community. I loved that Denver was right there and I could take direct flights to basically all my races, even flights now to Europe, which is huge. I loved that I just felt so much better training here than Flag. Flag is really high and there's obviously good benefits for, that. But for me, I just psychologically really sort of fell in love with Boulder. And I knew one person out here, Morgan Pearson. He was the only person I actually knew. But I got in touch with Reed through Joe Klecker, a lot of sort of connections here.
Yep.
And Reed was looking to move out to Boulder. And so we just started texted and said, hey, you want to get a room together and, move out here? And it was that simple. And I said, sure, let's do it. And we made that happen. We lived together for 6 months in South Boulder and just figured out the running thing. And through that, I sort of had more people reach out, say they would love to come train with me. They'd love to come check out Boulder. And it sort of just snowball effect grew into, a lot, creating a team and sort of having sort of like a whole group of guys around me. And that was not exactly how I thought it would turn out. It was really, really special. And, some of those guys are my best friends and it's been cool to create something with them. But really, it was just, to start out, I just thought Boulder was a cool place to live.
Yeah, Boulder's funny like that because you kind of get that bug here. I don't know. There's just something about the vibe and the energy, and maybe it's just the variety.
Yeah,
and just I don't know. Being in these flat irons here is something. There's something special about it,
Yeah, no, I love. I mean, the first time and my dad lived out in Boulder for like a year when he was training, and he always sort of growing up, Boulder's the best, Boulder. He'd talk about it, and so it was. I don't know if that was sort of like enough just to, persuade me to go check it out. But, I packed up my car and I told my parents, like, hey, I'm moving to Boulder in a week. I know one person. And they were, I think, a little skeptical at first. Yeah. They were probably, there's some doubts, but I think, they're pretty happy with how it's all turned out.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Morgan Pearson. He sent me a DM because, we were chatting that you were going to come on the podcast, and he said something funny like, "Oh, give him shit for the fact that a triathlete beat him at cross nats or something." I don't even know what he mentioned.
He's talking about himself.
Yeah,
Morgan always is. Morgan's one of the funniest people. I was on the plane before I flew out with him at cross nats. I was not in good shape. I was doing this because my teammates were doing it, and it was a really fun opportunity. Morgan is the biggest sandbagger ever. He comes on the plane, oh, I'm not fit. I've only been training for a few weeks. I go look at his Strava, and he's doing like insanely hard workouts, and I've done like 5 by mile and like 5:05.
Yeah.
And of course he beats me, but it is what it is. Morgan's a great competitor, and he's always ready to go, and I respect that. I respect that.
I think like if there's a triathlete out there that could probably do pretty well in professional running, it's probably him. He's got an insane, he's an insane, all of the Olympic triathletes now are running at an extremely high level. You look at Alex Yee, who just won the Olympic Games. He was a professional runner for New Balance before he transitioned over. So obviously tons of respect for what you guys are doing on the professional running scene. But, these guys are also like Morgan's an insane runner. So I want to talk a little bit about Tinman because you are the founder of Tinman. Talk to me a little bit about how that got off the ground. It seemed like you had this organic infrastructure that was sort of built in when you moved here. Did Tinman spiral off of that, or how did it get off the ground?
Yeah. So I was coached by Tom Tinman Schwartz when I came out here. That was Tom. Tom's nickname was Tinman, and so we created Tinman Elite, which is a team. I never really. The media space was really interesting when I came onto running. No one was really doing anything. It was sort of just you had the flow tracks and you had sort of these bigger organizations that would do everything, but you didn't really have individuals people doing podcasts or anything like that. It just hadn't, for whatever reason, picked up in the running world. And we saw sort of an opportunity. We were all living together, me, Reed, and Sam, and we saw an opportunity just to sort of start showcasing what it was like to be a professional athlete, what we were building. We wanted to have group events. We wanted to have sell merch. We wanted to do a bunch of media stuff, YouTube stuff, social media. And like you said, it was really organic. We sort of just started showing what we do every day. And it was that simple. And it really started to grow, I think, really quickly and rapidly because there was just such a void. There was not a lot of people doing that stuff. And it really picked up. Sam is he had a beautiful brain for the marketing side of things. He sort of knew how to capture people's attention. He knew what people wanted to hear and talk about. Reed has always sort of been, he was in journalism in college, and he loved sort of, the written side of things. So newsletters and, describing, like sort of our race experiences and things like that on, the written side of things. And I was sort of just like the guy who brought everyone together. And we kept it simple and kept it organic, and we just sort of grew. And we eventually were able to hire, someone to do a full-time media stuff for us. We were able to hire, start having guys on the team, adding, and we now have women on the team. So it's sort of just grown organically. And throughout the years, we've had, setbacks and difficulties and a lot of sort of, different sort of like highs and lows throughout all of it. We obviously like have had, a crazy sort of ride in the last 5 or 6 years, with COVID and all these different sorts of things, but it's been really, really special.
Yeah, that's cool. How much of the team is wrapped around exclusively media versus maybe like high performance running?
Yeah, that's, they go hand in hand. So the better we run, the better our media performs. We used to think maybe that wasn't the case. We used to sort of think like, well, if we're producing stuff people haven't seen before, if we're producing, things that maybe the running world hasn't done, or, behind the scenes stuff, whatever it may be, we thought maybe that would be enough. But people want characters that are really good runners, because people always want people to look up to, that, they see their dreams and they want to, be able to relate to that person. So they go hand in hand. The better we perform, the better our media performs. And it's pretty, black and white with that now. It's like, if we have Reed Fisher finish top 10, the marathon trials, like that's a ton of media. We can do a lot of really cool stuff around that. If we have someone DNF in a race, there's not much you can do behind that. It's not the best story ever. So yeah,
you kind of need that credibility, and you need a storyline. I think a high performance storyline, especially for a team that's wrapped around elite runners, is super important. Talk to me a little bit about how indeed Adidas got involved and sort of what their impact is on the team now. I'm curious to understand if you pitched it to them, if Sam pitched it to them, and sort of what their take was on the team. Was it something along the lines of them understanding that this is a passion project for you, and so they just want to support you and maybe support Sam because you guys are Adidas runners and everyone else has maybe just added value? Or have they really kind of stepped up and said, hey, we see value in all of the runners on the team and we want to be involved?
Yeah, great question. I love these questions, because these are not what people always talk about. We always talk about performance and other stuff, but the business side of the sport is really cool. So, a little backstory. So I was signed with Adidas. Reed and Sam were not signed with Adidas when they came out here. They were just free agents. They wanted to train with me and they were going to figure it out. We eventually started to, approach our agents and say, hey, like, I really want to be a full-time professional runner. Reed was working a part-time job. Sam sort of had like, a runway of, I could do this for this long. This is how much money I've saved up, and then I got to figure something out. They started running pretty well. They started to sort of, catch on, get attention in media, get attention in the running world. They started, getting in bigger races. Sam became was working on his German citizenship, and so that was a lot, really valuable. And we sort of went to Adidas and said, hey, like, we'd love to sign these guys. And they did. And they signed Reed and then Sam. And then we had an influx of athletes come in, and we said, we actually need a team deal.
Yeah.
I have a really funny story. We went to Adidas headquarters in Portland. So the big headquarters are in Germany, but they have a U.S. headquarters in Portland. And we basically showed up and we were like, hey, we're here. We want to pitch to the top running person why you should invest in Tinman Elite. And I already have my team contract. Sam already has his individual contract, but we really just wanted to pitch Tinman Elite to them and say, like, here's what we can provide value. Here's what we can do. Here's, all of our sort of, projected metrics for all these different things. And we show up and we literally waited hours outside the headquarters to get a meeting with, the head of sports marketing. We show up and they're not very happy. They're like, you can't just show up. And keep in mind, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I've very recently fallen into I love the business side of things makes a lot more sense to me now, and I sort of know how I would handle that now, but I didn't at the time, and I was sort of just following Sam's lead.
Yeah.
Sam had a small connection with Adidas. He interned for them at one point. And they're basically like, in a very nice way, they were like, guys, what the hell are you doing? Like, I have meetings scheduled out months in advance. You can't just show up on our doorstep and expect us to actually meet or talk with you.
Yeah.
The meeting went pretty well. We told him everything we liked. And at the end of the meeting, I'll never forget, the head of sports marketing said, at the end of the day, all this is about is selling running shoes. And most runners can't do that. And it's truthful.
Yeah.
We, a few years later, ended up creating a running shoe with Adidas, selling completely out of those shoes, and had our own logo on the shoe. I was in the headquarters in Germany earlier this year, and we still have a shoe in the headquarters in Germany. And so that was a really cool full circle moment for me, to know that we did it. And that was really special. And that was something that I'll look back on fondly. And I was really, really sort of proud of that. And I felt like Adidas actually got a return on their investment, which, like I said earlier, isn't the normal, situation.
That's a very interesting perspective. I'm interested to hear your take on that specifically, because it's very similar to maybe bikes and triathlon or wheels, right? So these are very expensive items. Shoes are a little bit more consumable because you can maybe buy, a shoe for $100, or if it's a carbon plated shoe, maybe $200 or $300 is the max you're going to pay. A bike can be $10,000. So it's very difficult for these company CEOs or sports management directors, sports marketing directors to understand the correlation to sponsoring an athlete and getting the return. If you look at running as a whole, and you look at someone like, use Noah Lyles as an example, or another big runner, Cole Hawker for Nike, are they delivering shoe sales on the amount of money that someone like Nike or Adidas is paying those superstars? If that's the perspective of the sports marketing director at Adidas, do you think that the millions of dollars they're spending on these other athletes is actually delivering shoe sales?
Great question. Probably a little controversial of an answer, but the answer is probably no for a lot of people. And I also think there's probably people that have a contract for $30,000 that is delivering that value. Mm-hmm. Noah is delivering value in a completely different way.
Yeah.
He's completely, the sport is completely transforming because of him. He the amount of attention he's called to it. I mean, even just little things, and it sounds ridiculous, but even little things of him, getting in Twitter fights with NBA players, like that's just something that track athletes don't do.
Yeah.
So I think that's a completely different side of, that's a completely different value. Like, I could never tell you how many shoes Noah Lyles is selling, but he doesn't have a shoe. And so I think that it would be an interesting experiment to see if, we gave signature shoes to sprinters and, top athletes, would they actually sell them? But that doesn't seem to be what running companies do for whatever reason. However, I think that there's a way, our sport is still grassroots. And I would say, maybe triathlon's a little different. I don't know. I don't know too much.
Super grassroots.
Yeah. But I think that there is such a way to invest in athletes that you can win locally. You can win, sort of the, I always think about Boulder for like, last year was the first year we set up a tent in Boulder and had sort of like a Tinman watch party, and we cheered people on. And I was like, I cannot believe it's taken me this long to realize how important this is.
Yeah.
How have we not won locally and won in Boulder? And I think that is a greater opportunity for sort of a lot of, up and coming people in the sport. Like, are you going to sling shoes for Adidas? No, that's just probably not the case. But does that not mean you're not valuable? No, I think it just has to be sort of, you have to be put in situations where you can provide value in different ways. And for us, we sort of create that value ourselves by creating a brand with Tinman Elite, by, showcasing athlete stories, by, hiring a media team that could be there to shoot moments of, despair and, super exciting, highs and super low lows. Like, that's sort of where we created value. I don't know how much that translates to selling shoes though.
Yeah.
And that's a long way to kind of get to that, but I don't actually know. And with bikes, it's probably even more complicated, right?
Yeah. I think for you guys have done a tremendous job, not only building the Tinman Elite, but to actually provide concrete value to say, we are selling shoes. That is so massive. It's similar for bike brands, right? Like if you have a code associated to your name and you say, hey, like I sold X number of bikes, here's how much you pay me. I generated you profit.
Yeah.
That's huge, but a lot of professional athletes want to do the whole, hey, you're using my likeness, and that should be enough for $50,000 or $100,000 or $500,000, and I think if you're someone like Noah Lyles or Cole Hawker, who won the Olympic gold in the 1500, maybe you do have that likeness that transcends the sales, but for those that are maybe on the come up, new pros or those in the trenches just trying to like survive as a pro, I think it's really important to maybe get in the weeds a little bit and do the work, whether it's the social media or selling the shoes or going local is an extremely good recommendation. So yeah, I think you guys are doing really good things with Tinman Elite, and I think like your contracts are going to be secure. I know it's a contract year for you, and I don't know what you guys are thinking, but I think Adidas would be silly to not re-sign you and obviously continue to participate with the team, because there are a lot of other brands out there that would see a lot of value in what you guys have built, and they could definitely capitalize upon that as well. You mentioned other podcasts maybe talking a little bit more about the training. I don't want to skip over the training because I'm interested in that as well, just as like a training and physiology nerd. So I want to talk a little bit about your specific transition from maybe 1500 running, because you mentioned, your high school success came in the mile, your early professional running, I think, was focused mostly on the 1500. What does the transition look like from being a 1500 guy to now being like a 5K, 10K guy?
So I trained very differently last year, and I focused on the 5K and 10K. Ironically enough, I ended up running the fastest I've ever run in the 1500. I ran 3:33 later in the summer. So there's this weird, the sport is just thriving. So like knowledge, I don't know if it's knowledge, I don't know if it's seeing other people run fast, but everyone's so good at everything that you can't really leave any stone unturned anymore. Like to be the best 10K guy in the country, like you have to, Grant Fisher's run 3:34 for 1500. You can't be a 10K guy. Yeah. You can't be a 5K guy. You can't be a 1500 guy. You have to be good at everything. And that was sort of the approach we took this last year was, what are my weaknesses? What am I struggling with? Let's work back from that and create a training plan. My mom did an excellent job sort of just reining me in, saying, let's cut out a lot of BS. Let's get you really, really strong. And let's have you run a great 10K. And I think you'll be able to thrive off of that. You'll be able to run a good 5K. You'll be able to run cross country. You'll be able to run a 1500. And that's what we did this last year is I really got super, super strong. I got really confident from doing that training. I think people sometimes don't give that enough credit, but doing training that you feel good in, feel like your body's sort of like recovering from, feel like you're adjusting to, feel like you can do time and time again is super important. And I think like for me last year, being an Olympic year, we just had to really get down to the basics of like, let's get really strong, let's get really, efficient, and let's stay healthy. And I think you can do well in everything.
What distance are you most stoked about right now?
That's a good question. I think I can run a really good 5K. I ran 2 5K last year. Like I got sick at the trials, and so I had to drop out. I got COVID, doubling back from the 10. I ran 13:08 in my first 5K last year, and I just feel like I can run sub 13. And I think that sort of finally is, putting me in contention to make teams and, be somewhat competitive on an international level. And I just know I have that 1500 speed that you have to have. The 10K is interesting because it's just an event you get to rarely run, and you get to run it like once. And, if it goes well, you can do really, it can set you up really well for the year. But if it goes poorly, you don't really have a ton of opportunities to go run another 10K. Yeah. So that one's sort of, I'd say I'm going to keep experimenting with that. And I really like how starting the year with a 10K because it sort of sets me up well for the rest of the year. But I really would love to run some really good 5K races next year.
Yeah, I think that'd be good, like starting, another Olympic cycle. You're still 4 years out from LA. I think that's probably a good approach. I want to get a little bit into the weeds on the training. What does a great week of training look like for you? What does it look like when you're actually in that flow, when you're kind of doing those sessions where you're getting that positive feedback and feeling really confident in it?
Yeah. if you first off, I post everything on Strava. So if you want to see what I do, I'm not lying. You can just go on my Strava and look at all of it. But a week I did most of the time last year was something like this. Monday, easy long run, 90 minutes, cover 13, 14 miles. PM, gym session. Tuesday, 9 in the morning was strides. We'd do like 5 times 100 meter stride really hard. That was sort of my speed work for the year. Like running 12 seconds for the hundreds, getting down to pretty fast strides. PM, 5 mile double. Wednesday, double threshold, something like 5 by 2K in the morning, 10 by 1K in the afternoon, 25 by 400 in the afternoon. Very slow, controlled, just keeping our lactate down as much as we can. A lot of people are shocked by this, but like I would do 2Ks where I'd be coming through the mile in 5:10, even 5:15 sometimes. But that you finish that day and you get in 22 miles of volume, it's a very big day. Thursday, easy 6 mile jog. And then I'd lift in the afternoon, just a pure recovery day. Friday, same day as Tuesday. So 9 in the morning, strides, 5 in the evening. Saturday was sort of our VO2 race specific session day. So in the fall, we'll do something like 20 by 200 meter hills. So sort of just like a hill day, VO2 max, power day. As we transition to more track races, something, a workout I love doing this year is we did 20 by 400, where we had sort of like 5 sets of 400s, and we would do, get faster each set. So start at like 62, 63s, and the last set we're running, 57s, 58s, off of, 90 seconds, 2-minute rest, something like that. That changes throughout the year and based on what we're doing. If in the fall we do more cross-country style workouts or longer intervals, and as we get closer to track season, faster stuff. And then Sunday, just an easy jog or off. And a good week is around 90 miles. And I could do that year round, rinse and repeat. That's sort of like a standard training week for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very impressive week. You mentioned using lactate to dictate some of the training intensity. How much are you guys focusing on hitting like LT1, LT2? How much are you using the lactate versus just getting on the track and hitting 60s like you mentioned, or 58s or whatever, setting the pace and hitting it no matter what? What's kind of the, the philosophy that you guys are subscribing to?
Yeah, that was something new my mom did this year, and it was really just to rein us in. I think we were just running too fast. We do a lot of effort-based training, but I think sometimes with effort-based training, you can just overdo it and not even know what you're overdoing it because you're so used to that routine of running, 450 pace for threshold, even though that's probably not your threshold for the day. So Wednesdays are very controlled. And those days, like, we're checking and testing pretty much the whole session. And like my mom will even, pull athletes if they're testing too high, or we'll stop, or we'll slow down, or we'll add rest. Those days are very data-driven days. Saturdays, those days we're not testing, we're just getting after it. And those are the days that we feel like are, giving us confidence for the races and reminding us that you got to run faster than threshold pace in the race, those are the hard days. And those days are, very, my mom is hands off in the fact that, she'll give us a range sometimes. She'll say, all right, it's the last rep, you can run fast, sort of that. There's not sort of like a set, you have to run this interval and this time. But we sort of have an objective and goal for the day. And if it's, 5K interval race pace, then there's a lot of intervals that are right dialed in at 63, 62, stuff like that. Yeah,
very cool. I mean, I see the videos of you guys out there at Niwot High School knocking it out. Sometimes you'll see us out there doing our thing too. I guess I'm curious to hear more about the team dynamic for those workouts because you have guys like maybe you and Sam who are both going for a 5K at the same time, but then you might have a dude like Reed or Connor who's also there trying to do their thing. How much crossover is there between the guys who are on the track and the guys who are focusing maybe on the marathon or being on the roads? Like, what's that dynamic look like?
Yeah, it's tough. Like Reed and Connor, some of my best friends. I wish I could do every single training session with them. I love training with them, but there's the realistic side of things. They're racing a 26.2 mile race and I'm racing a 3.1 mile race. So those races are different. There is a lot of overlap in certain times of the year. For example, like right now, everyone's basically doing the end of Reed's Chicago Marathon buildup and Connor's racing CIM 8 weeks later, the end of his sort of CIM buildup, because it makes sense. We're just in fall base training period. There's not sort of any races on the calendar that are important. We're just getting strong again. During track season, I won't see those guys for a few months because they have, a half marathon to get ready for. And I'm, getting ready to trying to run 56-second 400 pace for 1500. So it's very different. But, my mom does a good job trying to get us to overlap because, like you said, like, I love the team dynamic of, I didn't move out here to train by myself. I moved out here to have teammates and have people help me get better. And I think some of my weaknesses are, Reed's strengths. And so he can really complement me with those. And I can probably help him with some faster intervals and more VO2 stuff. So I think, finding a balance with it. But generally speaking, like, the nice thing is we all have easy days during the week. Reed now lives in Longmont. Joey, who's on our team, lives in, he's my neighbor in Longmont, and I'll run with those guys, a few times a week on an easy run or a double.
Sometimes that's honestly the most valuable session. You can go to the track and you can hit your lactate or you can hit your splits and be really focused and be very kind of like intrinsically motivated. But sometimes the doubles or the easy runs are the hardest ones to get out the door for. So to be able to go do 9 miles with a friend, I mean, it can go by like that. Whereas opposed to being alone, it's like, whoa, that was a long hour run or whatever.
Yeah. No, Reed and I will talk. I don't know how, because we're like best friends and we, have spent so much time together doing everything, running, building a business, like just life in general, hanging out. And like, we'll still, every run for an hour can fill the conversation for an hour. And it's pretty special. And this is what I'll look back on, when I'm all said and done, be really happy that I had that opportunity.
I mean, that's kind of, I've been reflecting on that. This is my 11th season as a professional triathlete. And I think the younger athletes, and myself included in that category, and maybe yourself, maybe you can tell me if I'm off base here, but you're just so focused on trying to just win races. And it's not until you kind of maybe have a little perspective and maybe a bit of maturity to understand that, winning races is important to keep the dream alive, and it's fun, and it feels good, but it's really the experiences along the way and the people you share the experiences with that actually make a career,
Totally. Yeah. And it's what keeps people around for so long. I think that, like, hardo mentality of I can grit this out and everyone's my competitor. It's sure, maybe that works for a season, maybe that works for a year, but man, like, the joy I have just showing up to Niwot and getting to work out with my best friends is like, I'm like, that's so special.
Yeah, that's huge. You've mentioned your mom a couple times here. I'm curious to hear about that dynamic as well, because, it seems like a very family operation for you guys, right? Like, you're training with your best friends, your mom and dad are there for every single session. Like, what are the positives out of that? And maybe what are some of the harder moments?
Yeah. I always start when people ask about this and say, it's not always been pretty and it's not been perfect. I have a lot of opinions about, what I want to do with training and that sort of, my mom and I can bump heads with things like that. But at the end of the day, what's cool about having your mom as your coach is she is your biggest supporter. She wants you to succeed more than anyone. And I have to remind myself of that from time to time. Sometimes it feels like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? I do things differently here. And it's like, wait a second. My mom just wants the best for me, just as a mother, take the coach element out of that. And so it's gotten better. Like, I think when we first got out here, there was a lot of sort of, stuff to work through. She was also coaching some of my best friends now. Like, there's not, there's a lot of dynamic with that. It's like, how do I give Drew attention, but not too much attention, so other athletes, don't feel like I'm favoring him. There's sort of a lot of weird things that you wouldn't even think about that she had to navigate, and she did a good job. I mean, there's not a lot of professional women coaches in our sport, so her just navigating that space in general has been like, she doesn't have like a million mentors to go to and ask for like, what's your advice on this? She's sort of figuring it out. And but she's been an incredible resource for our team, and it's been cool. I think, like, I always think of, the moment where I make an Olympic team, and I obviously get to see my family afterwards, and I just think, like, how special that is that, like, I would be able to share that with my mom and my dad, for that matter.
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned the Olympics. I don't want to overshoot that because it's obviously a very important part of running. I'm sure it's a North Star goal for you. How much of the next 4 years is going to be focused on getting on that team in LA? For those that don't know, Drew was fourth at the Olympic trials in the 10K this year, missing out on the spot by one, and then got sick before the 5K, so you weren't able to compete in the 5K at trials, which was pretty, obviously disappointing for you and all of your fans. How much of the next 4 years is going to be wrapped up in ensuring that you're on that Olympic team for LA?
Yeah, it's going to be, everything. It's going to be my big goal. I'm not going to look at it that way, though. Like, my goal will be to improve over the next 4 years and set myself up in training and in life and, in all the aspects I can work on so that I have the best shot to make the team. I'm not sort of like a do or die goals person anymore. Like, I believe that there are certain things and steps I can take every day to get a little bit better. And if I handle those, then the goals will, I'll be happy regardless of the result. And so for me, yeah, like that's it, like if I get another contract, like it'll be through LA and at that point I'll be 30 or 31. I don't know. I would love to keep running afterwards, but you just never know. And so for me, that's sort of going to be, maybe my last shot, and it's a US Olympics. And so there's a lot of, hype around that. Like my family could be, I have 2 daughters now. So it's like my oldest daughter will be, very old enough to understand what's going on. So that's extra special. So for me, like, I'm just gonna, take care of business this week, this month, this year. And then, I know that in 4 years, I'll be ready to go.
Yep, for sure. I mean, that's the perspective you've got to take, especially when you've got 4 years of runway. What is running and pursuing the sport at this high level still giving you the same amount of joy that it did maybe 8 years ago or 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's different. I think it's always, that's what's like, you do the same thing every day. And sometimes you're like, why am I doing this? Or, what, like, is there something else out there? Like, is this, but I mean, even today I had the most beautiful 8-mile run. Like the weather was perfect. My body feels good. And I'm just like, that should be enough for me to just be so content and happy with what running is given me. And I have to remind myself of that, when I'm struggling or the weather's bad or, I have a setback or an injury. But yeah, like there's always, it's a revolving door with goals. Like it's just always something to be excited about. Like this year I really want to do like a 10-miler and I really want to run Boulder because USA's is pushed back super late this year. So it would be the opportunity for me to do that. Like I really want to do those fun things, and those things keep you motivated, keep you hungry, keep you excited. And there's always someone faster than you, and there's always something to, there's always a carrot dangling right in front of your head that you're like, all right, I want to chase that.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny because one of the multiple questions I have written down here is, having had setbacks and injuries, or, you might in the future have setbacks and injuries, do you have an elevated level of gratitude for the times when things are just clicking and going well? It seems like you're in a really good place right now. Like, where is your level of gratitude at like an all-time high because you've had maybe some setbacks in recent years or in the past?
Yeah. This last year, I thought it was going to be my last year. I just didn't think I was running well enough. I thought like my body was sort of failing me. I just like felt bad all the time. And it's like, it's hard to, as motivated as you can be, if your body's sort of not following suit and you can't do the training that you think you need to do to prepare your races, it's not that fun. And so for me, I was sort of like, I went into this last year just soak in all the moments with your teammates, soak in all the race experiences, soak in the nerves that, maybe have overwhelmed you in the past, and be like, this is so cool that you get to experience this one last time. And ironically enough, I had a great year and things have sort of been looking up from there, and I feel really optimistic about the future. And yeah, you're just carrying gratitude to the starting line, and that's a really powerful tool to have. Like, I mean, there's obviously, the Tom Bradys that are the hardos, and, that will be the most dedicated, hardworking people and will outwork you. But I think sometimes the people that win on the starting lines are just people that are so like in love with the process of what it is to be a professional runner, that they just show up and they're like looking around the stands and they're like, this is so cool. And this is the last time I could get this opportunity. So go out and, give it everything you can.
Yeah. I mean, you're hitting me deep right now, man. I'm wondering if this, I'm feeling those a little bit. Like my body's been kind of failing me for the first time in my career. And I'm wondering if maybe 2025 or 2026 might be the end of my career. And so like, what would you say to me or the other people that are out here listening to this podcast that are sort of like at that precipice of not knowing what the future holds? And what do you do on the day-to-day to just kind of keep going?
Yeah, great question. For me, it was really, really simple. And it was just, all the reasons that I fell in love with the sport, get back to those. So whatever that may be, it may be just going for a different run with a friend. Like it could be just trying a new running route that's beautiful that you've just neglected because you're like, I'm just going to run from the house today or whatever. It could be simple like that. It could also just be, I think in some of my worst, like darkest moments when I was injured, I stopped thinking about myself. I started showing up to practices, timing people. I started, like we have a camp every year and I was in a pretty bad place, and getting to talk to the campers that were high school kids that were, inspired by my story. It's like, I think if you can zoom out and think a little bit less about your own running, you'll actually sort of create this environment where it's put in its place, and then all of a sudden it can click again, and it sort of comes back in maybe a different form. And for me, that was having kids too. Like it completely changed my perspective on everything. And I realized so much that running was now about supporting my family, and also just about like, being able to, know that this is just a chapter of my life, and that I have so much more beautiful, incredibly exciting things to look forward to post running, and it's not everything. And so for me, that was huge. And like I said, I sort of got back to the things that I loved about running to begin with.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I feel like I could ask you a million questions all day about running and about life, because I've really enjoyed, our conversation today. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but what is, I guess, one thing that you're really looking forward to in the future? You mentioned your two daughters, obviously they're young. What's something, whenever you're done with running, whether that's in 4 years or 8 years or whatever it might be, that you're really looking forward to getting into?
Okay, this is a funny answer, but I talk about it all the time with my wife, and I really want to have, so my parents are coaching our team currently. I want like a family compound with my wife's mom and my parents, and like I want like 10 acres. I want like all of my siblings who have kids to be there. I just want to dive into everything family. Like I felt so called to that, and so it felt like that's been so transformative for me. And so like I sort of have this goal of just being able to buy a plot of land and build up our dream home, and have my parents there and have my wife's parents there, and sort of like dive into that. That's sort of a completely has nothing to do with running. It's just sort of life. But on top of that, just spend as much time with my kids as I possibly can. That's what's cool about my job now, is I train in the morning, and then I can be with my daughters throughout the day. Like I can help my wife raise our kids, and then I go out for my afternoon training, and I come back and do the same thing. Like I'm there for every single meal. I'm there to put my kids down every single night, and that's been really, really special.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, family is everything, so it's really cool that you have that kind of North Star goal, and that probably grounds you a little bit too on the day-to-day when things are maybe going really well or not going well. You have this finite amount of time as a professional athlete, and there's so much to look for. You can really look forward to the moments that you're having now, but also so much to come in the future. So I always finish off the podcast with some rapid fire questions. I've got 6 for you today.
Okay, let's do it.
You ready to roll? All right. Favorite Adidas shoe of all time?
Oh, all time. Adios Pro 3.
Okay. Favorite Tinman teammate and why?
Oh man. I'm going to get so much crap for this. Reed's been there through everything with me. So I'm going to say Reed.
Yeah. Good answer. Good answer. Best workout of all time?
Hill repeats. Controversial, but I think they're you can use them in any way you want. Sorry, I know this is rapid fire.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Can you think of a singular workout? That was a good interpretation of the question. Can you think of one workout in your lifetime where you were like, oh, that was like the best workout I ever did?
Like fastest?
Whatever. I mean, I just know, like, I did mile repeats on Monarch one time, and
You just ripped it?
I just ripped it, and
Okay.
I remember the splits exactly, and it was just like one of those days where I like wasted a race in training.
I did a session with Sam. It was 8x600, and we probably averaged like 130 or 131 for the 600s, but it was just one of those days where 60-second pace felt like nothing,
Totally.
So,
Those days are just like, I don't know, you kind of live for those days and you pray for them on race day. And you get one every 2 years or something.
Totally.
Okay. 3 mile, 4 mile, or 5 mile double?
5 mile double.
5 mile double guy. All right. What's the perfect pace for a long run in miles?
18-mile pace.
That's an honest answer. All right. And Longmont or Boulder?
Longmont versus everybody.
There we go. Longmont Elite. That's what we called it on the
Let's
triathlon
go.
scene. All right. That's it, man. I really appreciate you coming on today. Really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. This is really fun.
All right. Cool, man. See you in the next episode.